Hi everyone, today I'm going to introduce 4 of the most useful Excel formulas that you should start using right away because it is going to help you save tons of loads at work. And at the end of this video, you'll also be able to understand the basic algorithms behind how generally Excel works with inputs of formulas so that you yourself will be able to put together different formulas for your own customized calculations. The first 2 Excel tricks that I'm going to introduce is going to be involving the if condition in Excel. The if condition in Excel is simple to understand and use. Equals to if, open bracket, and then the condition that you want to set here, followed by the result if the condition is met, and then followed by the result if the condition here is not met. So if this condition here is met, we are going to display this result here. Otherwise, if this condition here is not met, we are going to display the result otherwise instead. Without further ado, let us move into the example. So this simple trick here is going to help you to display a cell content only if a related cell is not blank. And this trick is going to help us eliminate unnecessary things across the spreadsheets. And you will be amazed by how tidy your spreadsheet will look afterwards. So let us start off with the simplest example here. The total cost is equal to the quantity multiplied by the unit cost, which in this case is the cell C7 multiplied by the cell D7. And because there's no dollar sign here in the formula, I will explain about the dollar sign things in depth later on, also in this video. Because there's no dollar sign here, we know that the formula is going to change when this cell is being pasted to other cells according to the relative position of the cell, the original cell. So let's say in a normal practice, what we do is we'll just copy and paste the cell or extend the cells, let's say to the entire column here. And we'll notice that this formula will change when it is being pasted 9, 11, 12, 14, 15. The formula will going to change according to the relative position from the cell it is being pasted from. However, if you notice, this way we will be introducing a lot of zeros or unnecessary values, or even prompt errors at other parts of your spreadsheets whenever there are blank cells that are involved in your formulas. So one simple trick to overcome this is to utilize the if condition that we have discussed just now, whereby we set a precondition here. If, let's say, this cell here is empty, then we want to keep this cell empty as well. Otherwise, the original formula. So, if this cell unit cost here is empty, the total cost should be empty as well. Otherwise, if this condition is not met, meaning to say the unit cost has values, only then we will be displaying the original formula, which is the quantity multiplied with the unit cost. Enter. And when we drag down, we will see that your spreadsheet will be cleaner, whereby this value will only show if this value here is not empty. Next, we will be doing it for the rest of the formula, for the rest of your spreadsheet. If, let's say, the price per unit here is empty, we want to keep the total price empty as well. Enter. For the profit, if, let's say, the total cost is empty, we want to keep the profit empty as well. Enter. And for the profit margin, if, let's say, the profit is empty, then we want to keep the margin empty as well. Enter. And now, when we drag down the value, you will see that you will have a much cleaner outlook for your Excel sheet. And now whenever you want to update any values in the empty cells, all you have to do is to just key in the values, and you are going to have all other required information automatically generated. So this way is particularly useful when you want to create an automated sheets for your colleagues to key in values, while maybe having other parts of the sheets protected or locked. The second tip here is more into the use of the if formula in Excel for conditioning. So now in this example, we want to determine the circuit breaker size of each of these circuits with this amount of calculated current according to the information that we have right here. So if, let's say, for the circuit B3, whose calculated current is 112, the circuit breaker size should be 200, because 112 lies between 100 and 150 from this piece of information that we have right here. So the if condition, the if formula we have is right here. If this cell J48 is less than 20, then we are going to display the result 30. If this cell is greater than 20 and lesser than 60, which means between 20 and 60, we are going to display the result 60. And of course, we put 60.01 here just in case the value is exactly 60. So if, let's say, this value, J48, is between 60 and 100, we are going to display the result 150. Everything simple, and according to the information, the logic is simple, but the steps may be complicated. So these blank spaces here were added just for the ease of illustrations, where when we combine the formula, it may look something like this. So Excel, in some older versions of Excel, this formula will not be accepted because the Excel cannot process nested ifs for more than 7 or 8 conditions. So one simple method is just to split the if condition into different nests by using an addition symbol. So in this case, we are grouping the first if condition until the 7th if condition in the first nest here, followed by an addition symbol, and then followed by the 8th until the 14th if condition, followed by an addition symbol which separates them from the last if condition. So now we are going to copy this formula and test it out. Upon pasting the formula, we are going to check if the cell is correct. The cell J48 is correct. And the cell here should not come with a $sign because we want the calculated current to change as we paste this cell formula across the column. We want the calculated current to change as well, so we don't include the $sign. So as you can see, when we paste down the entire column, we see that the formula here will change according to the relative position of the original cell, from 48, 49, 50, and so on and so forth. And now we will have the circuit breaker size based on the calculated current according to the information that we have right here. And of course, there are many other simpler methods, such as using the pivot table, that we can use, which I will cover it immediately now. Let us now move into the third trick. This third trick here is going to enable us to solve the previous example with a much simpler steps using the pivot table. So before we solve this third example here, let us quickly scrape through some of the important Excel formula that we are going to use. And those formulas, I could have quoted much simpler examples, but the reason I included those formulas is because I feel that those are the top 5 most useful formula that might help us in Excel a lot. So the first formula, let's call it a large formula. It is going to match the value or the content of this cell H79 in green here with a list of contents from those cells in yellow here, and then display the closest smaller value. The small formula here, on the other hand, is going to match the content of this cell with that of those cells and return the closest larger value. The index formula is going to match the value or content from this cell F96 in green here with the contents or the list of contents from those cells, and then display the nearest or the closest value regardless of the size of the number. And lastly, the lookup formulas is going to match the values from those cells, this cell here, with a list of contents from those cells, and then returning specific answers here. Bearing in mind that one simple concept of Excel formula is that we don't have to modify the entire formula, we just copy and paste the entire formula, and all that we have to change is some information such as the cell's name, while other parts of the formula should and can remain unchanged or untouched at all. This is what makes Excel formula simple to modify to fit our purposes. So let us now move into the example. We want to determine for each of those circuits here the circuit breaker current, the circuit breaker size, the group and the price of a circuit breaker based on the information we have here, just like just now. For example, if we want to determine the the information here for the circuit of R2, whose calculated current is 67, then the minimum current should be 60, the maximum current should be 100, the circuit breaker size should be 150, and the group and price should be C and 60 respectively. So, to determine the minimum current, we are going to utilize the large formula here. We are going to copy this, paste it here. Let us check through the formula. We want to match the value of this cell. This should be H78. We want to match the value of this cell with the list of contents from this cell, which is the minimum current, and then display the closest smaller value. Hit enter. The closest smaller value of 50 should be 20. So in this formula, again, we match the value of this cell H78 with the list of values from those cells in blue, and then display the closest smaller value. This is the function of the large formula. If we paste this cell across the column, we will notice that some errors might occur right here. The reason so is because we did not fix the content of the pivot table, and so when this entire formula is being pasted down across the column, you can see that the position of a pivot table will run away. Can you see? The position of the pivot table changes when it is being pasted down according to the relative position of this cell. So all we want is to fix the position of this pivot table. The information in the pivot table should remain fixed. And what we want to change is only the calculated current, because the calculated current is the only variable that we want to change when we paste this formula across down in this column. So what we're going to do is we are going to add in the $sign simply by hitting the function key F4 until you see the $sign is there for both the rows and the column for the information in the pivot table. Do this the same way, and then we hit enter. Now we only have the information here to vary, while the rest in the pivot table should remain unchanged. We can safely drag it down, and you will see that this pivot table's information will not be changing anyway. Can you see that? So let us now move on to the maximum current. The maximum current here, we are going to use the small formula instead. We're going to copy and paste it here. So the small formula is going to match the content or the value of this cell H78 with the column or the list of contents here in column maximum current, and then display the closest larger value. This is the function of the small formula. So the closest larger value of 50 in this column here should be 60. And bearing in mind that the $sign of the pivot table should remain fixed with the $sign. And then we hit enter. And then for the circuit breaker size, we are going to use the VLOOKUP function right here. So in the VLOOKUP function, what we're going to do is that we are going to match this information, the maximum current, with the column here, and then display information in the adjacent column of the same row. Or in the other way, we can also match the information from the minimum current with this column right here, and then display the information in the third column of the same row. So let us begin. In this case, we are going to match the value J78 with the list of contents from this column and then display the information of the same row in the second column. Here, 2 means the second column. And then we are going to hit enter. Let's look through the example again. For the group now, we are going to paste the formula again. We want to now match this value also, the maximum current, with the list of information we have in this column here. And then we want to display the third column of the same row. So if let's say it is 60 here, we want to display the third column, which is B. So we are going to change this to 3, meaning third column. And then remember to include in the highlighted cells the related columns that we have added. And hit enter. For the price, we can use also the same formula, but let's now match the value of the minimum current instead. We want to match the minimum current with a list of contents from here. Remember to include in the highlighted cells the minimum current as well, because the value that it is going to match is always the first column of the highlighted cells. And then for the price, we are going to display the fifth column from the first minimum current, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. We are going to display the information of the same row of the match result, but the fifth column. And then remember to include the fifth column into the highlighted cells and hit enter. Now we are going to have the entire value, and making sure all the dollar signs have been fixed for the pivot table and set to vary for the information that we want to vary. Now we can safely drag the cells or copy them across the entire column, and the result will be generated automatically no matter how many inputs that we have included right here. Now we are going to use the pivot table again, but now to retrieve the closest value or the nearest value without regard of whether the number is bigger or smaller than the matched value. So for this example here, we are going to determine the closest available diameter for those actual required diameter that we have been given with, and then also to give the pipe type of the corresponding diameter that is being matched. So the formula that we are going to use for this is going to be the index formula. Copy, and then we paste the index formula and hit enter. So again, we are going to match the value or the content of this formula, this cell here, with the list of contents from those cells in blue here, and then display the closest or the nearest value without regard or regardless of whether this number is smaller or greater than the matched value here. Then we are going to hit Ctrl, Shift, and enter. Hold down Ctrl Shift at the same time, making sure that the cursor is in the formula tab here. Ctrl Shift, hold down, and press enter, and the formula will display. For the pipe type here, we are going to use the lookup formula. Copy, and then paste. For this pipe type here, we are going to match again the value of this cell here with the list of contents from those cells in red here. After all, this cell is derived also from the list of contents here, so we are not worried that the number will not match the number here. So, and then again we are going to match the content of this cell with the list of contents from those cells here, and then display the result in another column of cells in green here, of course of the same row of the matched value. So we are going to hit enter, and as we drag down the formula, we will notice some error right here. Let us find out the error. As you can see, the pivot table here has its enclosure, or the highlighted parts, run away from the original intended pivot table's information because we didn't add in the $sign to fix the cells. So remember that all parts of the pivot table, because we want it to fix when we paste it to whatever cells in your spreadsheets or even in another sheets, because we want it to fix, we are going to add in the $sign by hitting the function key F4 and then hit enter, and now you have the correct information, where you see only this content will change in position as it is pasted down, but the pivot table's information will not change in any way, even when I am going to refer it in another sheet. So when I'm going to refer it in another sheet, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to add in, if this cell happens to be another sheet in another sheet, we are just going to add in the sheet name, let's say sheet number 2, and then followed by an exclamation mark, meaning that those cells is referred from the second sheet named sheet 2. But I'm not going to show that example, that is just a brief explanation of that can be happen. So now, before we end this video, let us go through a recap example whereby we want to determine the number of pipes required, whereby we set a condition if the required diameter exceeds 50. Let us set the condition if, let's say, the required diameter exceeds 50, we are going to need to use 2 pipes. And what is the diameter of each of the pipes? And let's say if the number is smaller than 50, only 1 pipe is required, and what is the diameter that is required for that pipe? So take a minute or a couple of minutes to try this out before we review the answers. Let us now copy these cells and paste it down here so that it is easier for us to refer. So, like I said, we are going to use 2 pipes whenever the required diameter exceeds 50 millimeters. So the formula for this one would be, if the required diameter is less than 50 millimeters, we are going to stay to using 1 pipes. Otherwise, if the condition is not met, whereby if this size here exceeds 50 millimeters, we are going to use 2 pipes instead. And enter. Another way to allow the use of multiple ifs to set in more conditions, we can try to use the formula here that we have used before just now. So let us try out this formula. We paste it here, and this value is going to be changed to B107, This one is also should be B107, 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 B107 as well. So if let's say the value B107 is less than 50, we are going to display 1 because only one pipe is required. Now we set the condition if let's say it is greater than 50 and less than 100, we are going to use 2 pipes, and then we can add in the third and the so on and so forth conditions. If let's say the diameter exceeds 100 but it is less than 200, we are going to use 3 pipes instead. Close the brackets until you see the black bracket at the end and hit enter. You are going to get the same values, except that we can have more conditions in this case. If let's say it is between 100 and 200, then we can use 3 pipes instead of 2 because we have just added in another condition whereby if the pipe is between 100 and 200, we are going to display 3 instead of 2. So this is just to show you that the formula just now here can allocate. It is the same as this if function here, but in this way we can allocate more conditions to be fitted in. So nevertheless, we are still going to stick to 2 examples because we have just stated that either 1 or 2 pipes is to be used. So now we want to determine the required size per pipe, which is going to use the formula here, the index formula. So the value that we are going to match is this value here, B107. We are going to match with the diameter here, or here is the same, and then display the closest value regardless of the size of the number. But because whenever we have 2 pipes that is involved, we know that the required diameter per pipe is going to be reduced by half as well. So we are going to add in the condition also for this case, whereby if let's say the diameter required is more than 50 millimeters, the required size per pipe, which is the matched value here, should be divided by 2. If otherwise, if this condition is not met, which means that if the diameter required is less than 50 millimeters, then we are only going to need 1 pipe, and the required diameter per pipe is going to be the full diameter here without any division. And then close bracket, the last bracket should be the black colored one, and hold on Ctrl+Shift and enter, and the required diameter per pipe will come out. And as you can see, if you paste this value down to something greater than 50 here, we will show 30, which is the result of the matched pipe 60 divided by 2, because 2 pipes are required, and each of the diameter will be 30. So now because we are just taking the value divided by half, it will not be the representing the correct available diameter here. We are going to determine the correct diameter here. We are going to use the small formula again. So we are matching the contents of this cell with the list of contents from those cells, F4. Those cells C96 to C100, F4, and then display the closest larger value. So hit enter, and when we drag down the value, we will notice that the required size per pipe here is upsized to match this value. There isn't much difference except for this case where there is the required pipe size 35. We upsize it to match the available size from here. That concludes the lessons that I'm going to share with you guys today, and hope it will help in the future.